Thank you so much, Robert, for the nice introduction. So people probably have the wrong impression now of me. I'm actually not a really kind guy. Anyway, so I was asked to give a lecture today about ACL injuries. Where are we? And have we solved the problem? And Richard, thank you very much for this nice title. So, So why an ACL talk? Well, of course, we know that a lot of ACLs operations have been done worldwide. I'll give you only the figure of the US, and it's been more now. It's all over 250,000 ACL reconstructions a year. That's a little bit less here, but it's close. So we do about 150,000, I think, here in Aspetar. No, of course we do less, but we have a major population here because all the operations are going to the rehab department. So if you count it out in Aspetar, it's a real important population. And it is a very high incidence in Qatar. I don't have to tell you this. This is from the study from Cristiano. He showed that the incidence in Qatar was surprisingly, and in the whole GCC, surprisingly higher than anywhere else in the world. And the question is, of course, why is this? And have we solved this problem? Do we know why this incidence is higher in Qatar? So when we look at ACL research over the last 20 years, we have 7,554 papers. Now, is that a lot? Is that not a lot? Well, I give you some comparisons. That is more than all the papers on hamstrings, groin, and Achilles tendon together. So yes, it is a lot. And I'll show you this graph here. And you can see that it started in 1996, so we have 20 years. And then it goes up, and the last 10 years, from 2005, it goes even up more and more. And so now we are about, every year we have about 450 to 500 papers a year. That means, sorry, it's 8:05, so you probably missed the first ACL paper of this day. So every day we have 1 or 2 new ACL papers, okay? So try to keep up, guys. So of course, if we have that many papers, the conclusion is probably very simple. We know everything, and we have very good results in our operation, in our treatment. So the conclusion is you better go to another research area, because we know everything here. Well, maybe this is true, and this is probably the reason why I want to present this talk, to tell you where are we, and are we ready to move to another area because we have that many good results. So have we solved the problem? Well, first, if you want to look at a problem, you start, of course, with the beginning. And the beginning is, what is the mechanism of injury? And I'm going to show you a slide, a video presentation of an ACL injury. And of course, you've all seen these kinds of videos. And you see the injury happening here. And if you look, you can look at it several times. So I made it that you can see it really, you can enjoy this injury backwards and forwards and whatever, slow motion. So by now, it's clear to you all and to the literature that almost all ACL injuries are non-contact injuries. And the mechanism is a knee valgus internal rotation. Typically, during pivoting, movement changes, deceleration, jumping on one leg, and these things. And we all know that it's much more frequent in females compared to males. We don't know why, but it is. And it's very important to remember that we have a higher incidence in females than in males. Because, I will tell you later, but I'll tell you already, we have much more research in females. But in Aspetar, we hardly treat any female ACLs. We treat male ACLs. Can we use the research from females in males? Well, we'll see. Anyway, so about the injury mechanism, do we know what it is? Yes, we solved the problem. So very good, we're ready to go. We took a good start. Now the next thing is, of course, why is this happening? If you looked at this video just a minute ago, this lady, she was a professional handball player. She did this movement probably millions and millions of times. And no ACL injuries happened. Now, why did it happen this time? Why did it happen? Are we able to identify the important risk factors why this ACL injury is happening? And are we also able to identify the people who are at higher risk for this injury. So let's look at the predisposing factors first. So in other words, which are the important factors which are important in this injury, how this injury is happening. And for doing that, prospective research is needed because you investigate a large group, a large cohort of individuals, you follow them, and in the end, after examining thousands of athletes, you end up with 4 or 5 ACL injuries. So doing prospective research, you should be a little bit crazy because it's a lot of work for only a few positive results. Anyway, when we look, and this is a summary in 2014, when we look at the prospective studies done in male athletes on ACL injuries, looking for risk factors, this is the list I'm going to show you. Now look at this, because these findings, so you have risk factors here, the findings, the amount of studies, and the quality of the studies. And the quality is scored on a score of 14. So 14 is a total score that is given, and it's the usual quality criteria. So this is the list of all the studies being done. So you see many studies, looks good. However, I think we can decide that if you have a score less than 7, it's not a good study. It doesn't reach 50% of the quality. So okay, let's delete all these studies which have less than 7. We end up with only 2 studies, sorry. One got a score of 6, so actually we should delete it. So we end up with 1 study of a score of 8, showing that the narrow intercondylar notch has a higher risk for ACL injury. So that's good, 1 study. Now, of course, we do have some other studies, and if we apply the same criteria to these studies, we end up with another 3. And actually, it's not 3 because these studies are the same, so it's actually 2. So in total, after 20 years of research, doing 7,554 papers, we have actually 3 studies looking for risk factors in males. Wow, surprised. So what do you think we conclude about predisposing factors in males? I don't think we have a good thing. So I'll give a red check bar. We are not there. We don't know what predisposing factors are in ACL injuries in males. Now, okay, predisposing factors, but does it mean that people are predisposed? So what about predisposed individuals? Now, how do you go to predisposed individuals? Well, normally, you start with the predisposing factors, and you try to identify them. And suppose you can identify them. We cannot, of course, because we only have 3 studies, but suppose we can identify them, then you have a difficult and a complicated equation which tells you what the chances of getting an ACL injury. And based upon this difficult equation, you can identify types, and you can identify individual and calculate their risk for an ACL injury. So at that time, if you have this one, you can calculate this, then you can look at predisposing individuals. Then at that time, you are ready to say this guy is at high risk, he needs more ACL prevention training than somebody else. However, of course, since we don't have this, we do not have this, and of course we cannot do this, so do we have an idea about who is at higher risk for an ACL injury? We have no clue whatsoever. I'm talking about males now, okay? The situation might be different in females, so we have no clue at all. Okay, but let's be positive, and the question is, can we prevent maybe ACLs? Well, maybe that's a good one. What about the prevention studies? So when we look in the literature on all prevention studies which have been done, I've only selected these who were prospective or randomized controlled trials. Now, you know, randomized controlled trials, it's the highest quality. Well, I must disappoint you. We only have 2 randomized controlled trials, but we have 9 cohort studies. Again, we have a score here, and the score is on 10, okay? So we can say this study is 3 on 10, this study is 5 on 10. So we have 9 studies performed. We have 6 positive results, 3 no result in males and females. Only 1 study, and this study, is done in males. And it's not even a high-quality study. And the study is done 20 years ago. Nobody has ever done a study after that. And the reason is very simple. It's much harder to do a study in males because the incidence is lower. You need a larger group to end up with a sufficient amount of ACLs. And all these studies, all these famous studies, are all underpowered. The amount of ACLs is 4 to 9. In such an important area, we have conferences all over the world organized on this. I don't think it's very good. So, can we prevent it? Well, I don't want to be negative. It seems we have taken good steps in females, because we have 8 studies in females, and 6 of them have good results. But we have only 1 study in males. So my score would be kind of an orange thing. So it's not bad, but for sure we are not there. Okay? Or don't you agree with that? Yeah, if you're quiet, you agree. I tell my wife always. But she never agrees with me. Okay, anyway. Now the question is, the next question, and probably the most important one, can we treat ACL injuries successfully? And that is, of course, a very important question, and you, of course, think the answer is yes. So when I looked, and I only looked at the research the last 2 years, okay? These are all the research papers, the last 2 years, who looked at outcome of ACL papers. And they all agree on one thing, and that is the outcome is good. So finally, I can tell you the most important thing, the answer is very positive. We do know a lot. And this is a study in 2012, a Swedish study, done on almost 18,000 ACL reconstructions in Sweden. And this is the overall, and I'm sorry the slide is not very clear, I know, but I can guide you through it. So this is the KOOS questionnaire, and the KOOS questionnaire is a very typical questionnaire used in ACL injuries, and it has several subdivisions. So it talks about symptoms, it talks about pain, it talks about ADL activities, it talks about sport and recreational sport, and it talks about quality of life. And what you see here, this blue bar, is the pre-op condition, and then you have the post-op condition, and you have here red 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years. So this is the result after the reconstruction, and this is the result before the reconstruction. And the conclusion of these authors, 18,000 ACL reconstructions, is all subscales significantly improved. And as indeed, you see, these are the blue arrows. You have a significantly improved result. So it's good. So they conclude also the results of this study are good. However, this is a study I found, and this is done in patients who did not have, so it's the same score, it's the same KOOS score, on patients who did not have a history of knee injuries. So this is where you want your patients to be back. This is the level we want. This is a good level. And this is where you want them to be. Now, if you put this line into that graph, you get this. And if these arrows were statistically significant, these arrows are for sure statistically significant. And if this is the good outcome you want, this is statistically significant different from the good outcome. So yes, we do a good job. We significantly improve the pre-op condition to this level, but we are significantly away from this condition you want your patients to be in. So are we doing a good job? Well, we do a statistically significant job, but maybe not enough. However, when you look at the results, you see that some of them, this is the variation of the results. Meaning this is the bars at 1, 2, and 5 years. So some of the patients do perfect. So these are very good. Although you have some patients who do very bad and they have almost the same score as their pre-operative level. So maybe we want to explain why we have this large variation. Because it's very important to get an insight why we have this variation in results. Because I want my variation to be very narrow. Then we know that our results and our treatment is very good. So can we explain something about this variation? So these are some studies, and yes, we can explain a part of the variation in outcome. And of course, the secondary articular injuries at the time of injury determine your outcome. So if you have cartilage lesion, if you have meniscal lesion, etc., your outcome is worse. So we do know this. We also know that a quadriceps is very important. And we do know that the best predictor of outcome is the preoperative subjective assessment. Preoperative is the best predictor of the post-operative subjective assessment. So it seems to be that we are pretty well in determining why the variation, where the variation comes from. Well, if you calculate all these results together, we are proud to say that we can explain 25% of our variation. 25%. Meaning, if you have the same patient or two patients with the same ACL injury, no secondary injuries, the same operation by the same surgeon, getting the same rehab here in Aspetar, you have 75% of variance which we are not able to explain. We don't know why this one is doing much better than the other one. We are unable to answer this question today. And this is not good. So, and the reason why we are unable to answer this is that most of the studies are looking at only one factor for outcome measure. And it could be the strength, or it could be the genetics, or it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be that. But no study exists looking at all these things together. And of course, in real life, we know that all these things play a role. And all these things together will play a role. But all these things will interact because genetics influence strength. We know that some people are if you give two people the same strength training, we know that genetics determines that the strength gain in one guy is much bigger than in the other. This is determined by genetics. So this has an impact on this, and this has probably an impact on this, and that on this. Nobody knows this interaction because it had never been investigated before. So this is why we cannot explain the large variation in outcome. And this is what we should do instead of writing 7,554 papers. So we need a multidisciplinary approach who looks holistically at the problem. So can we treat ACL injuries successfully? Well, we have a large variation in treatment success. I'll give it an orange code, like, okay, we can explain 25% of the variation, but 75 not. But okay, it's orange. We're not in red, like here. We don't know anything. We do know a little bit about the variation. Now, what about re-injuries? Well, and so we are still, can we treat them positively? When we look in the literature about the ACL re-injury rate, re-injury means that you rupture your same ACL who has been operated. Okay, this is re-injury, so not an ACL on the other side. If you look at the literature about the incidence, it goes from 6 to 34%. It's a large variation with an average of about 21%. 21%. 1 in 5 of every ACL reconstruction re-ruptures. Good. Now, if we look very recently on a consensus statement who determines that successful outcome is returning to sport at the same level, and we apply this criteria to the re-injury rate, we have the following thing. This is return to sport, so all ACL injuries, these 82% return to sport. 63% return to sport at their previous level. So this should be our outcome measure, okay? Because these guys, they stay in their couches in the evening. Of course they will not re-injury or rupture their ACL. So the average ACL re-injury rate is 21%. When we look at the average or at the ACL re-injury rate in the guys who return to sport, we have an average of 26. When we look at the guys who returned to their previous level, we have 33%. 1 on 3 of all ACL reconstructions fail if you look only at the guys who return to sport. It's pretty good, no? And when are these injuries happening? And these are data from Polyvius. He's making a PhD on ACL, so I will not tell too many things about his data, because it's his data, of course. But when you look when these ACL injuries, so these are ACL re-injuries in Aspetar, when you look when these are happening in the first month, in the first 2 months. 30% of all re-injuries happen in the first 2 months. Now, why is this? Is this because we sent them too soon to return to play? Or is this because our discharge criteria are not good? And Polyvius also did, so all credits to Polyvius, did some study, and he did a very nice study. What he did is he followed 133 ACL patients after return to sport. So some of them returned to sport, well, they all returned to sport, but some of them, and it was about half of them, returned to sport because they were discharged here, because they reached the discharge criteria, okay? And then they returned to sport. However, and this is everywhere, and it's not different here in Aspetar, some of them, half of them, did not reach the discharge criteria. But anyway, they went back to sport. Now what he did, he's a very clever guy, he thought, well, is there a difference in re-injury incidence between the guys who did reach the discharge criteria and the ones who didn't reach the discharge criteria? And the answer is very simple, yes. The ones who did fully discharge, meaning they did meet the discharge criteria, had an incidence of 12.6, which is very low. Remember the 33% in the literature, so we are very low in re-injury rates. However, when you look at the guys who returned to sport and who did not fully discharged, they have an incidence almost as high as a 33, 28.7. In other words, if you reach a discharge criteria, you have 2.5 times less chance to re-injury your ACL. So, can we treat ACL successfully? What about the re-injuries? Well, I think re-injuries, it's too high. It is unacceptable that we have incidence rates on 1 on 5, 1 on 3. This is too high. We have to solve this problem. If I would ask the surgeons in any other surgery where they fail 1 in 3, 1 in 5 patients, they would probably tell me it's not good. Well, this is not good. We cannot be satisfied with this. However, we know that the return to sport, if we take some discharge criteria, that we are on the good way. So we can predict a little bit this re-injury, and we can do something about it. The last thing I want to tell you, knee OA. What about knee OA and ACLs? Well, knee OA seems to be a comorbidity of ACL. And this is a recent systematic review showing you whether or not you operate them or you don't operate them, the result in knee OA is exactly the same. So we are not stopping knee OA when you operate ACL patients. And it's much higher in ACL patients compared to their control healthy subjects. So knee OA seems to be inevitable. It is a result of a slowly falling cascade of dominoes set in motion probably by the initial trauma of the ACL. Maybe bone bruises or whatever. And the ACL reconstruction cannot prevent this. So we know this at the moment. Now, we did a study, and I presented this study before, so I'll go very fast about this. We wanted to look what is the cartilage status at the moment we let these players go back to the field. In other words, at 6 months. So we looked at ACL patients at 6 months, and we looked at the quality of their cartilage. And this is how we did it. So we measured 3 things. I'm not going into detail, but we measured the recovery of the cartilage after a half-hour run. We looked at the biochemical composition, and we looked at the morphology. And the results we found is that the morphology was okay. Biochemical composition was worse in the ACLs at 6 months compared to their control matched group. And the recovery of the cartilage after half an hour of run was much slower, as you see here. So we have a delayed cartilage recovery, meaning if you let the guys run half an hour at 6 months after the injury, the cartilage takes much more time to recover to its normal state. Now you can imagine playing football, 90 minutes, what happens then? On cartilage, which is not of good quality. So at 6 months, it seemed that the cartilage is really fragile. And this could be a potential danger for the development of knee OA. So, what about knee OA? Are we doing a good job? I don't think so. We're not able to prevent knee OA after ACL injury. So, bringing this to conclusion, take-home message. We start, of course, in the green area. Nice. We know the mechanism of the ACL injury. Okay, this is a good starting point. Okay, true. I hear you laughing. We don't know the risk factors for ACLs in males. So we have no clue how these factors interact. Remember the slide with all the different things we're measuring? Nobody ever measured it in males. It's amazing. 7,554 papers, and nobody ever measured this. So we don't know who is at high risk. We absolutely don't know why we have an increased incidence of ACLs in Qatar, in this region. We don't know. Is it genetics? Is it the field? Is it environment? Is it strength? Is it neuromuscular? We don't know. We have no clue. And we cannot identify these risk players. Therefore, we need large, multifactorial, prospective studies. But of course, these studies cost a lot of money because we need to investigate in large cohorts. And today, in the world of today, you better do research which you do in 1 month and you can publish a month later. And then you get a paper. And this is why, of course, these studies have never been done. Nobody is so stupid to invest all the time and efforts and money in these studies. But this is what gives us the solutions. I think we have taken good steps in the prevention of ACLs, but in females, not in males. One study 20 years ago, and it got a score of 5 on 10. So we don't know anything. Can we really prevent it? Do prevention programs work in males? We have no clue. We have a, let's say, satisfactory outcome after reconstruction. So, okay, we do a good job, but of course, we cannot explain why some people do very good while others with exactly the same injury, exactly the same operation, the same rehab, why these do not go, not return to sport, or they keep on having swelling, or they have a delayed rehab. We have no clue why this is happening. We have an unacceptable high incidence of re-injuries. We don't know who is at risk. We only know, thanks to Polybius, that the return to play criteria seems to be good indicators or good preventers of re-injury. But that's all we know, because his research is the first of its kind. Nobody else ever done it. So that's good news, but we don't know who is going to re-injury anyway. And we are not preventing knee OA at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, have we solved the problem? Well, the positive guys will think yes, while the negative guys probably say, oh, no. So I'm Belgian, and I'll try to get a consensus between them. We always do. We say, well, we have learned something. But of course, we're not there. So coming back to one of my first slides, Should we change the area of research after 7,554 research papers? No, because we hardly have solved any of these problems. So we should continue to do research in this. So we have made some progress, but some important issues are still unsolved. So these are the challenges for the future. And you see this increase in studies with every 2 papers, or every day about 2 papers. The question is, do we need more studies to get it and increase this even higher every year? Maybe 3, 4 papers a day? No, no. We don't need more studies, but we do need better studies. So the quality of the studies need to be better. We need sufficiently powered studies. We need multifactorial studies. But therefore, and that is the problem, I think, in many of the research places where they do this research, we need a multidisciplinary approach where we can evaluate the genetics, the strength, etc., 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 etc. And once we can set it up, then we are able to do it. Almost all research places in the world, they don't have this. So they can never do it. So it doesn't exist. I think there are a few places in the world where we can do it. And I think Aspetar is one of them. So I hope I convinced you that we can do this research here, and it's really needed to help our patients. So thank you very much.